It happened in a crowded public space, where no one expected power to shift in seconds. A confident woman made a move she thought she could get away with, taking something that wasn't hers from a man she assumed was beneath her. The moment was brief, almost invisible, but the disrespect was loud. What she didn't know was that this man carried far more influence than anyone around them realized. As eyes watched and silence grew heavy, one quiet decision began a chain reaction that would unravel her career in public. And when the truth surfaced, there was no turning back. What made her so certain she was untouchable, and why was she so wrong? Before that moment, his life followed a rhythm built on discipline and restraint. He was a black CEO who had learned long ago that success did not shield him from being underestimated. It only changed the setting. His days were filled with boardrooms, negotiations, and decisions that affected thousands of people. Yet he moved through public spaces quietly, without announcement or display. He preferred it that way. Years of navigating subtle bias had taught him that visibility often invited judgment before respect. That day had been exhausting. Travel delays, back-to-back meetings, and the familiar pressure of always having to be composed weighed on him. All he wanted was a seat, a brief pause, and the chance to disappear into the crowd like everyone else. Around him, people rushed, talked, and scrolled, unaware that they were sharing space with someone whose name carried real power. Across the aisle, a woman moved with confidence shaped by entitlement. She was used to being obeyed, used to spaces bending in her favor. In her world, appearances decided value, and assumptions were made in seconds. She scanned the room, not seeing individuals, only obstacles and opportunities. Nothing had happened yet, but something was already wrong. The imbalance was there, hanging in the air, unnoticed by most but deeply familiar to him. He had felt it before, in places where respect was conditional and dignity was negotiable. What neither of them realized was that this ordinary moment, in an ordinary setting, was about to expose far more than a single act of disrespect. It would reveal how quickly prejudice surfaces, and how dangerous it can be when aimed at the wrong person. The moment stretched longer than it should have. What began as a small, careless act quickly turned into a public imbalance of power. The seat was taken without permission, without acknowledgement, as if it had always belonged to her. The man stood still not from weakness, but from experience. He had learned that reacting too quickly in moments like this often made things worse. Around them, people noticed, but not enough to intervene. Some looked away. Others watched with quiet curiosity, waiting to see who would win. The woman's confidence grew in that silence. She occupied the space fully now, her posture communicating ownership, her expression dismissive. In her mind, the situation was already resolved. The man fit a story she thought she understood, one shaped by stereotypes she had never questioned. To her, he was someone who would step aside, someone who would accept the loss without resistance. That assumption fueled her certainty. For him, the familiar weight returned. It was the same pressure he had felt years ago in elevators, waiting rooms, and checkpoints. Moments where his presence was questioned before his humanity was recognized. His accomplishments, his discipline, his authority meant nothing here. All that mattered was how he was perceived in this instant. And perception, he knew, could be dangerous. The atmosphere thickened as attention slowly gathered. A few phones tilted upward. A few whispers passed through the crowd. The situation had shifted from private disrespect to public spectacle. The woman, emboldened by the lack of challenge, pushed further. Her body language signaled control, as if daring anyone to question her decision. She believed the crowd was on her side. What she didn't notice was how the mood was changing. The silence no longer felt passive, it felt tense. People began to sense that something was off, that this wasn't just about a seat. It was about entitlement colliding with restraint, about prejudice pressing against quiet authority. Still, no one stepped in. Fear of involvement kept them frozen. The man finally moved, not aggressively, not emotionally, but deliberately. His calm unsettled her. It wasn't the reaction she expected. There was no apology, no retreat, just composure. That composure confused her, and confusion quickly turned into irritation. She mistook his self-control for defiance, and in her world, defiance from someone like him was unacceptable. The situation escalated when others were drawn into it. Authority figures were alerted, not by the injustice itself, but by the disruption it created. Eyes shifted toward him first, as they often did. Assumptions formed instantly, stacking against him without evidence. The imbalance widened, and the stakes rose. Now the space felt smaller. Every movement mattered. Every second carried risk. The man understood that this moment could easily spiral into something far worse, not because of what he had done, but because of what others believed he was capable of. The woman stood firm, convinced she was protected by the system, certain that consequences were for people like him. But beneath the surface, something was building. The truth had not yet been revealed, but it was moving closer. And when it did, it would not arrive quietly. The tension reached its breaking point when authority finally stepped in, not to question the act itself, but to restore what they assumed was order. The crowd leaned in, phones raised, breaths held. The imbalance was now fully exposed, and the man stood at the center of it, calm on the outside while the weight of the moment pressed down hard. He knew how quickly situations like this could turn irreversible, how easily dignity could be stripped away when perception replaced truth. The woman's confidence peaked. She stood protected by her assumptions, certain that status was on her side. Her posture spoke of victory, of someone who believed consequences were reserved for others. In her world, power had always answered to appearance, and she trusted that pattern without question. Then everything shifted. Credentials were checked. Names were confirmed. The quiet began to crack. What had looked like defiance was suddenly recognized as restraint. What had been dismissed as insignificance revealed itself as authority. The realization moved through the space like a shockwave, visible in faces that stiffened, eyes that widened, and hands that slowly lowered their phones in disbelief. The man was no longer just a figure standing alone. His identity carried weight, corporate influence, public responsibility, and a reputation built far beyond this moment. The narrative collapsed in real time. Every assumption that had protected her now turned against her. The system she trusted began to correct itself, and it did so publicly. The woman's certainty drained away as understanding replaced entitlement. The crowd sensed it instantly, the reversal, the exposure, the sudden accountability. This was no longer about a seat. It was about how quickly prejudice could blind someone to reality, and how unforgiving the truth could be once revealed. The man remained composed as the full picture came into focus, knowing that what followed would echo far beyond this space. Careers, reputations, and futures were now in motion, reshaped by a single moment that could not be undone. And as the crowd absorbed what they had just witnessed, one question lingered in the heavy air. How far would the consequences really go once the world found out? The moment ended, but its effects did not. What unfolded afterward moved quickly and quietly, the way accountability often does once the cameras are gone. Reports were filed. Witness accounts aligned. The incident, once dismissed as minor, revealed patterns that could no longer be ignored. The woman who had acted without hesitation now faced consequences she never imagined. Professional scrutiny, public backlash, and a career forever marked by a single choice made in seconds. For the man, there was no celebration, no satisfaction, only a familiar exhaustion. He returned to his life with the same composure he had carried through the incident, but something lingered beneath the surface. The reminder that no title, no success, no amount of achievement could fully protect him from being reduced to an assumption. The truth was painful, not because it was new, but because it was repeated. Yet this time something was different. People had seen it happen. They had witnessed how easily prejudice surfaced, and how quickly it collapsed under truth. The story spread, not because of outrage alone, but because it forced an uncomfortable reflection. It challenged the quiet habits of judgment that often go unnoticed, unchecked, and unchallenged. This wasn't just about one woman losing control of a moment, or one man reclaiming his dignity. It was about how society decides who belongs, who is questioned, and who is believed. It exposed how power can be misused when entitlement goes unexamined, and how fragile that power becomes when reality steps in. The incident faded from headlines, as stories often do, but its message remained. Racism doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it shows up in small acts, casual decisions, and confident assumptions. And sometimes those moments reveal more than anyone intended. The question left behind is not what happened to them, but what happens next. When we see injustice unfold in front of us, do we look away or do we speak up? Because silence is not neutral. And moments like this remind us that change begins the instant we choose to notice. If the story moved you, let it be a reminder that change begins with awareness. Every voice matters, including yours. So if you believe stories like this need to be heard, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more eye-opening stories just like this one. Your support helps bring these truths into the light.